Hey there, scholars and future English teachers of America. We are going to go over a quick review of phrases, clauses, and types of sentences. So let's jump right in. A phrase is a group of words that has noun stuff or it has verb stuff, but not both. That's important for us to see that or means it's not going to have both of those things. A group of words with some noun things or some verb things, but not both. So for example, swerving wildly side to side, you can see that there is some verb stuff. There's a verb swerving and all these things to describe the swerving, but no noun things. And you can see down here with a bucket of llama food that you've got a bunch of noun stuff. You've got the bucket and you've got the description of the bucket, but no verb. So these are both examples of phrases. Then we have clauses, and we need to know that a clause is going to have noun stuff and verb stuff. It's going to have a subject and a verb of some kind. So when we talk about clauses, we can see things like llamas do not like you. Here's a noun, llamas, and here's the verb part, do like, except they don't like you. So then another example would be if a tiger is a large cat. There's a noun here, tiger, and there's a verb connected to it. This being verb is. And I'm hoping that you're noticing something about those two clauses. One of them can stand by itself, and one of them feels like it's incomplete. It feels like it needs more. It has a subject and a verb down here in the bottom, but it still feels like it needs more. It's missing something. So let's investigate those two types of clauses. You have an independent clause, which it has the same noun stuff and verb stuff that we expect in a clause, but this one is a complete thought, okay? Subject plus verb plus complete thought, that gives you an independent clause. Llamas do not like you would be our example. You smell funny to a llama would be another example of an independent clause. It's a subject and a verb and a complete thought, and true. Then you have dependent clauses. And of course, they're still going to have their noun stuff and their verb stuff because it's a clause. But these ones do not express a complete thought. They're not going to be complete sentences. And they usually begin with a subordinating conjunction. There are a couple other ways that we can begin dependent clauses, but mostly it's going to be subordinating conjunctions. So you'll see words like since and because and although and if. Those are good examples of subordinating conjunctions. Since you smell funny to a llama would be an example of a dependent clause. It has a subject, it has a verb, but it's not a complete thought because of that subordinating conjunction right there at the beginning, since. And because I was a target of the llama mafia is an example of a dependent clause. It's got a subject, it's got a verb, but it's not a complete thought. It's missing that complete thought part of it because of because. The subordinating conjunction is right there at the beginning of the sentence as well. Here's some practice. Just some reminders to be able to do this well. Because of the wild yaks, we're thinking, is this a phrase, an independent clause, or a dependent clause? So what we can see is we have a noun, something, but no verb stuff. So if we had to label number one, we're going to label that a phrase. Look at that beautiful writing. Number two says, before we went over the hill with the yaks. And we could start looking at prepositional phrases. If we need to find subjects and verbs to figure out if this is a clause or a phrase, we can actually get rid of those prepositional phrases, make it a little easier. And we have a subject and we have a verb. We went. But is there a complete thought? There's not, because of our subordinating conjunction. So as a result, this one we would have to label a dependent clause. Number three, we decided the yaks were not a threat. Thank goodness. Let's see. We've got a subject, we've got a verb, decided. And if we kind of roll the rest of that sentence out, we think, yeah, that's actually a complete thought, right? We decided the yaks were not a threat. That stands by itself. It has a subject and a verb. That makes it an independent clause. Number 4 says, even though they make a lot of strange noises, well, we could get rid of this prepositional phrase to help us find our subject and verb, because, we won't find our subject and verb inside a prepositional phrase. So let's see. It looks like they is a subject and make would be a verb. So we've got a subject and a verb. It must be a clause, but is it independent or dependent? Well, you've got this even though. That means it needs something else. You can't just say that as a complete thought. Even though they make a lot of strange noises, needs something else. It needs more to be complete. So that one is going to be a dependent clause. The number 5, a group of wild, woolly yaks. Well, you've got some noun things going on, but I don't see any verbs. And so if we've just got nouns and their descriptions, then we've just got a phrase. That one's just going to be a phrase. And number 6, they are a little bit scary up close. We've got a subject, we've got a verb, so it must be a clause. And now we're thinking, okay, so is it independent or dependent? And that one seems to stand by itself. It doesn't have one of these subordinating conjunctions. And as a result, we're going to call that an independent clause. Great. All right, let's go ahead and go on to our next bit. Perhaps. When we understand clauses, then we start thinking about, okay, simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. So your definition for a simple sentence, quick reminder, it's one independent clause. It may have compound subjects or it may have compound predicates, but that doesn't make it a compound sentence as long as we're still dealing with one independent clause. Then you have a compound sentence, and that's going to have 2 or more independent clauses. And we're going to be looking for some tips for a compound sentence. We're going to be looking for a comma and a coordinating conjunction, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. We're looking for one of those. Or to join those 2 independent clauses, we could see the fanciest punctuation of them all, a semicolon. So if you have a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or you have a semicolon, that's kind of a good tip that you might be looking at 2 independent clauses joined together properly to make a compound sentence. And then we get to the complex sentence. It couldn't just be that easy. Somebody has to get complex. And this complex sentence is going to take 1 independent clause, and it's going to need 1 or more dependent clauses. And as a result of that, we look for subordinating conjunctions. Since, if, when, although, because, we look for those kind of key words to say this group of words with a subject and a verb is dependent, and it's hooked on to an independent clause. And if you have a combination of those clauses, we'll call it a complex sentence. So here are some examples of those. We are looking for number 1. We went to the store, but I did not get my desired gift. It's hard to deal with when it happens. But let's go ahead and see if we can work our process on these sentences. We're going to get rid of prepositional phrases because we won't find subjects and verbs inside of those. So now we have we went. So we know we have a clause here. And I did get. So we have a clause here. We got 2 clauses, and now we just have to look at the way they're joined together. We got to think, is one independent and one dependent, or are they both independent clauses? Here's a hint. You've got a comma and a coordinating conjunction, and that tells you that really that should just be joining 2 of the same kind of thing. So 2 independent clauses should be joined by that. Let's just check it out. We went to the store, subject, verb, complete thought. I did not get my desired gift. Subject, verb, complete thought. So we're going to call this one a compound sentence because 2 independent clauses joined in this way makes a compound. The next one says, I wanted a yak. It's all I've ever wanted. A subject, a verb, and that's all we have. So we only have 1 clause, and if we only have 1 clause, the sentence type is really easy to figure out. It's just a simple sentence. Number 3, since yaks were not on sale, my parents bought me a cat. It's not what I was looking for. Get rid of a prepositional phrase, and find some subjects and verbs. Yaks were is a subject verb, so we know we have a clause. And parents bought, so we know we have another clause. And we're going, okay, do we have two independent clauses, or is there a mixture here? You see a hint? It's right there. The word since tells us this one is a dependent clause, and the second hint is it's just a comma. There's no comma and conjunction, no and or but or yet. So since we have just a subordinating conjunction at the beginning, we know this is a dependent clause. We know that it's hinged onto the independent clause by just a comma, and so that one's got to be a complex sentence. A mixture of dependent and independent clauses is going to be complex. Number 4, in case you didn't know, a cat and a yak are really different creatures. So no prepositional phrases, no help there, but we do have a subject and another subject, compound subject, and we have a verb. So how many clauses do we have? Which is still just one clause. We can have an independent clause with compound subjects, and it doesn't really make it a compound sentence. We still just have one independent clause, and if we have one independent clause, we'll call it a simple sentence. Number 5 says, I named the cat, who was brown, Yak. Not to be confusing. So we've got an interrupting clause here. We've got a subject and a verb, I named, but then we have this clause kind of just plop down in the middle of our sentence. And it's got its own subject, it's got its own verb. And we're going, okay, now we have two clauses. Is this a compound sentence or a complex sentence? And this little comma right here with no conjunction tells us that this is a dependent clause sitting right in the middle of our independent clause. And so since we have a combination of an independent clause, I named the cat Yak, that's independent, who was brown is going to be dependent. So if we have a combination of those, we're going to call it a complex sentence. The last one here, number 6, now I have a cat named Yak, and I love him. That's a happy ending. I have is a subject and a verb, and I love is a subject and a verb. And so we're thinking, okay, two clauses. Does that give us a compound sentence or a complex sentence? Here's a key. The comma and a coordinating conjunction tells us that these are going to need to be independent clauses. They're joined together in that way. And if you have two independent clauses with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, you're going to have a compound sentence. I hope that helps you think about phrases and clauses and also these 3 types of sentences.